about 10 people. We have here not so much, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome everybody. I'm pleased to welcome Hillel Schocken, who came over from Tel Aviv just the day before yesterday. Yesterday via Vienna. We met first in April or May. We had a cup of coffee together in Tel Aviv. It was very much warmer than nowadays in Innsbruck. And it was just only one sentence. We talked about new cities, about research projects, about cultural transfer problems between Europe and Israel or Palestine. And it was just only one sentence where we said maybe it could be a good idea to invite Hillel Schocken to give a lecture at Innsbruck University. So this was just one sentence. And I'm very pleased that sometimes even such small sentences could be realized. Concerning the realization, I would like to thank Ayani. This is Visa. Ayani is the abbreviation for Austrian Israel Academic Network Innsbruck. Ayani is just shorter, but it's the main idea of your office to support academic exchanges between Austria in general and Israel. So this is exactly what we do. And I would like to thank you for everything, for support, for financing, for just booking hotels and everything you did for this lecture. Thanks a lot. Hillel Schocken has been principal of Schocken Architects since its establishment in 1978, leading projects in a large variety of building types and programs, including urban planning, museums, educational facilities, offices, housing, industry, and conservation. This is exactly what he wrote about himself. Prior to his obtaining his diploma of the Architectural Association School of Architecture in London, he earned a BSc in Industrial Engineering and Management at the Technion, which was Israel's Institute of Technology in Haifa, and it was the first academic institution, if I remember right, ever founded in Israel. The Technion was the first one.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Because it was much before the founding of Tel Aviv University or Ben Gurion University.
I'm not sure about the Hebrew University in Jerusalem.
Hebrew in Jerusalem could be slightly older. In parallel to his professional activity, Schocken is or was an associate professor of architecture. No, he was an associate professor of architecture at the Israeli School of Architecture at the Tel Aviv University, and served as well as its director between 2004 and 2008. Throughout his career, he has been teaching in architecture schools throughout the country as well as abroad. Schocken is the author of an original urban theory that suggests common characteristics to all efficient urban environments and provide measurable urban indicators that can serve as a basic practical tool for the planning and designing of successful urban environments. That's the main reason why we have it here, because we have, during this winter term, we had a seminar series running about new cities. We care about the new city of St. Petersburg. We had heard some words about Tel Aviv, about Brasilia, and we heard something about these ideal planned cities like the Garden City project, the Garden City concept, the new city project of Le Corbusier, and of course of the Cité Industrielle by Tony Garnier, because these were the three main ideal city projects which still influences city planning. Schocken served in various juries for architectural competitions and prizes, among the Israeli Prize for Urbanism of the Country of Beautiful Israel, and the Emmett Prize for the Arts, Science and Culture under the auspices of the Israeli Prime Minister's Office. Schocken is a member of the Council of Engineering and Architecture at the Israel Ministry of the Economy, and is among the founders of MIU, which is Movement for Israeli Urbanism, and its major institute. So concerning teaching, you just retired last year,
yes.
If I remember right, but the office, Schocken Associates, is still working, it's still running. So again, welcome to Innsbruck. sorry for that cold weather. -degrees in Israel are pretty rare, I suppose. And I'm just curious for your lecture. Great to have you here, Hillel.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for inviting me. I think this is going to be one of the most expensive lectures you ever heard, because Ayana made an effort to bring me all over here. So I hope I'll prove good value for money. That will be for you to judge. And yes, I think Klaus, you mentioned our brief meeting, and I think our brief meeting and the fact that I'm here now should be in the background of this talk. And I prefer to call it a talk rather than a lecture, because you see I don't have any papers with me. I'm going to talk out of my head and with the help of this presentation, which will guide me through. But if you want to ask questions and interfere while we are doing it, so just please feel free. You can all get closer if you like, so you can have it a little more intimate. And I'm happy that I'm talking to you after you have been studying all these precedents, especially the later theories of urbanism and their influence on the city. And I'm also happy that you mentioned Brasilia, because it will also come up in my talk. Okay, so let's begin first with these three images that show three scenes from streets. I guess it's difficult to tell which cities these streets come from. Probably the center one is the easiest to guess because of the special chairs. You would probably guess right that the center one is Paris. But I'm not sure you will guess which one is the left one and which one is on the right. Can you try?
The left one should be an Italian city.
Pardon?
The left one should be an Italian city.
Good. Good. Why?
Because of the tabacchi symbol.
Ah, okay, good. I should have got that out. Okay, you're right.
Ah.
The left one is an Italian city.
Yeah.
And now it's very easy to know which city it is. The center one is what you could guess it is, but it could also be found in other places. You can find it almost, no, well, not exactly like it. You won't have a street like this with stones, but in Tel Aviv you have the same seats in the cafes, in some of them. Anyway, the center one is Paris, and the right one is New York, with the typical fire escapes. Now I'm showing these because many times when I hear people talk about cities and special character of a city, I heard the term the DNA of the city. What is the DNA of Innsbruck? What is the DNA of Florence? What is the DNA of Paris? What makes Paris what it is, and what makes Florence what it is? And the concept of the genius loci, the idea of the spirit of the place. When you see this sketch of the cupola of the Duomo in Firenze, you don't need to say anything. Everybody knows which city it is. And when you see this, you know it's Paris. It's a drawing, and you know it's Paris, as if the drawing captured the DNA of Paris. And this is New York, obviously, you can't miss it. Everybody will tell you, a child would tell you what these cities are. So what is the DNA of Venice? Is it the gondola? Is it the canals? If we want to recreate a city like Venice, should we copy this? And what is this? This you probably don't know, but this is a drawing of a favela in Brazil. This is also a city. What is the DNA of the favela? And if we know the DNA of the city, does it mean that we can clone it? Like we can clone a sheep, you know, the Dolly, the sheep. Yeah. So it's the idea that if we capture the DNA of a city and we want a city like that, we could do it. And yes, we're actually trying. This is Paris in China. The Chinese are experts in trying to clone cities, and they didn't. Paris was not enough, so they are trying also with London, and they have a little bit of Venice too. This is all in China. They brought a palace from France, and they even brought Hallstatt from Austria. And apparently, most of those new places in China have become ghost towns, but they don't have the spirit of those cities they are trying to clone. Now, the cloning is not only this, we look at China as if it's something foreign, even to us, but we are not only cloning in China. The Prince of Wales, in fact, asked architect Leon Creer to clone a small town from the 17th or 18th century England by designing this. Sorry, it didn't pass. It takes time. Now to count two of them. Move. I'm not sure you heard about Poundbury. Anybody here familiar with Poundbury? Poundbury is a, I don't know why it doesn't move, it will move in a second. Something about the memory here. The Prince of Wales has shown some great interest in architecture and planning over the last few years. It started with what is known as his carbuncle speech at the RIBA. He was invited to talk to the Royal Institute of British Architects, and he gave a speech that made a lot of uneasiness among the architects in England, because he said that most of what modern architect is doing in England is like a carbuncle, a sore thing on the face of a dear friend. They are ugly, they don't serve their purpose, and so on. And he advocated for return to the styles of architecture of earlier times. And he found in Leon Creer a good person to help him realize this dream because Leon Creer is a student of both, in the positive sense, of Jane Jacobs, of whom I'm sure you heard in your course, and also of Camillo Sitte, which I hope you also heard about in the course. And why I'm saying that I'm happy with one and not so happy with the other, because I think Camillo Sitte is in a way responsible for the fact that Poundbury looks very nice but doesn't work, and Dorchester, which is next door, which is a real environment, belongs to the period, actually works very well. It's the same town. Poundbury is just a neighborhood, a new neighborhood that the Prince initiated. And you see, this scene looks like a real place, and the scene before looked, I think, a little more artificial. And if you were there, like I was last year, you would feel you are in a stage set, which is very, very nice, but without the actors, without the life. And scenes like this are part of that old Dorchester that actually works. And the question is why this works. And I want to make it quite clear that I'm not looking for a return to any past. I mean, I might use some examples from the past because unfortunately we don't have too many modern examples of good urbanism. And I can also explain, I hope at the end of the lecture you will understand why we don't have so many examples. But the fact that I will show all the examples doesn't mean that I think we cannot make a new urbanism that works. Okay, in order to go in deeper into the lecture, I'm going to show you now 3 pairs of photographs. On the right, you will see a human being. You agree that this is a human being, right? And on the left, you will see an aerial view of a city taken from Google Earth. I don't think you can guess which city it is. And the fact that you cannot guess is important, but this is Athens. And here, another pair, another human being on the right, and another city on the left. And we can easily tell that this is a human being with a glance. We know this is a human being, and with a glance we know that this is a city. Okay? And this is Moscow. Another human being, and this time it's Melbourne. Easily we recognize the fact that the face is of a human being and the city is a city. It doesn't look like anything else. Same goes for this one. This one is Paris. And this one is a bit surprising. It was surprising to me too. It's Cairo. I want you to pay attention to the fact that I'm showing you cities from various places around the world, various cultures around the world, Australia, Africa, Europe. They all look to us like cities. And we didn't know that this was an Australian city when we looked at it, and we don't know that this is Cairo from just looking at it. Like we don't know the people we were looking at, who they are, what they believe in, what their name is, whatever, right? We know nothing about them. And the last one is my city. It's Tel Aviv. And another guy, and I don't think he's an Israeli. I took all those faces from the internet. I don't know where they are, who they are, whatever. Okay, the common thing to all these faces is a program, is a code, which is an amazing thing, and I urge you to bear in mind the fact that this is all these people, and all of you here, including me, are a product of a program, which is called the genome, the human genome. And the nice thing about this program is that while it creates a species of humans that we easily recognize as humans at a glance, each individual of these species is a unique event. There has never been another one like that, there will never be another one, and there is not one like that today. And if we change a little bit the program, we get chimpanzees or rats. Now the amazing thing about this is that also the rats are a product of a program that makes, not the rats, the monkeys, the chimpanzees, but each one of these is a unique case, like Bill Clinton. This is the only one we know from this photograph. There has never been another Bill Clinton. There is no other Bill Clinton today, and there will never be another Bill Clinton. That's amazing when you think of it. I mean, if nature was clever, it was clever by inventing such a program. Okay? What I'm trying to suggest to you is that there is also a program to these cities. which can do the same thing as the program for the living entities do. Okay? There is a DNA of a city, but the DNA of Paris, or the DNA of Florence, or the DNA of New York, is not so interesting as the DNA of all these cities. And I think that if we know the DNA of all these cities, it will enable us to design a city that will not be exactly like Paris, will not be exactly like Florence, will be another city, but it will be a city. A city that I think is deserving the term city, because sometimes we call cities things that I think are not cities. I think we call cities things that are chimpanzees, in a sense. Okay, so I'm talking about the urban genome. And if we find this formula that makes us understand what makes this kind of environment into the thing we call city, into the thing that looks from the air, like all these 6 cities I showed you, that are still different cities from each other, then we can hope to be able to design new cities. I'm going even further to say that if we can compare a city, a human being, to a chimpanzee, we can also show that Nice in France is a city and Brasilia is not a city. In much the same way that I added only recently, we can show that Innsbruck, this is Innsbruck, is a city, and Milton Keynes, I don't know if you studied about Milton Keynes during your course, but this is one of the latest of the new towns in England, is a chimpanzee, according to my understanding of what a city is. And in fact, if I use the term good city or bad city, please stop me, because I don't like to use this term. Sometimes I use it when I don't think well enough about my sentences. What I mean is an efficient city. Okay, efficient city is a city that serves the purpose for which it was built. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the purpose for which cities were built in the far past and are still being built. And I think one can illustrate this with these two graphs. One shows the fact that you know that over the years the ratio of world's population that lives in urban environments is growing all the time. In 1950 it was about 30%. In 2050 it is going to be about 70% according to the United Nations estimates, and now it's over 50%, almost 60% of the world population already lives in cities. Which means that if we are scientists looking at this animal from outside, from the space into the world, and we look that all these little ants are concentrating in very dense central places, then something must pull them there. They don't go there just by chance, okay? The other, this pyramid, maybe you heard about it too. This is from the psychologist Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He defined what are the human needs that will allow a person to achieve self-actualization. Self-actualization is something we talk about when we don't want to talk about survival, because basically humanity needed survival. Nowadays, humanity is fairly secure in surviving, but they also want more than to survive. They want self-actualization. Okay, so it's a level above, but I'm talking about basic survival. And for survival, we need at the base the physiological needs. And above the base, we have safety, love and belonging, and esteem. Now, for all these three, and I think also for the physiological, we need contact with other people. Okay? I don't think a except for the one need that people won't help us secure, and that's air to breathe. Okay, we need air to breathe for survival. If we don't have air, we die. But once we have air to breathe, the next thing we need, safety, love and belonging. I mean, love and belonging is other people. Esteem is obviously love other people. So we need contact with other people. And survival is always looked upon as somebody alone in the alien environments, tough environments like a desert, like the middle of the sea or the Arctic, with threats of wild animals or other people or whatever. So you need all sorts of tools to be safe and to keep yourself. And it's very difficult to survive this way. These animals, like us, also realized that in a group they are much stronger than individually. I don't know if you saw this movie, this series, This Wonderful World, I think it was called in Israel, by the BBC, where they show the scene of the penguins in the Arctic winter at night, in a terrible blizzard, a group of thousands of those, all packed together like this, and you think it's a massive group of penguins standing there, but they're not standing for a minute. They keep moving all the time. Those in the center move out, and those in the perimeter move in all the time in order to warm themselves. Once they are warm inside, they move out, and those that cool out, they move in to warm themselves. So they realize that they can only survive these extreme situations only by cooperating with one another. Same thing for human beings, and the Americans summed it up very well. They say, united we stand, divided we fall. Business, it's all about networking. If you want to succeed in business, you need a lot of networking, and I don't have to tell you that people like, or companies like Facebook make a lot of money out of the fact that people need contact with other people. That's the basic thing that people need in order to secure everything else. And the purpose of the city, therefore, was always and still is to be a reservoir of potential contacts. And I think this is the only reason for the city. If people didn't need contacts, there will not be cities. And the next slide is going to be a definition of the city. And I don't know if in the course that you had a chance to look for or even found a definition of the city. Because when I looked for a definition of the city, I didn't find it. Anybody wants to define the term? Look, it's amazing. Think of it. We are designing cities, we're building cities, we are professionals, and whenever, I tell you, not only here, whenever I give a lecture, a talk about cities, and I ask for a definition of the city, it's always beginning with it being very quiet. People feel very embarrassed. Oh, it's evident. I mean, everybody knows what a city is. We don't need to ask this question. And I think if we don't know if you cannot define the thing we are designing, we probably cannot design it. That's my belief. So I'm going to give you for free, oh, not for free, they paid for it, a definition of the city. Okay? A place where humans can physically interact at various levels of intimacy while remaining mostly anonymous. It's a bit shocking. I know, every time people, especially professionals, because when I talk to people who are not professionals, sometimes they even come with a definition that is close to it. But the professionals, they are always surprised. Now, you see, my short term for this theory is intimate anonymity. Okay? And these two terms are actually contradictory, right? You cannot be intimate and anonymous at the same time. And I think I need to clarify what I mean by intimacy and what I mean by anonymity, okay? Intimate, various levels of intimacy. So I'll give you some examples. This is one level of intimacy, of contact between people, okay? This is another. This is not funny. This is an intimate contact. The other one was more intimate maybe, but this is not so unintimate, okay? That's another contact. So is this. All of those contacts actually happen in public space. This is what they call, I think, in America or in England, jumble sale. When everybody wants to sell things, exchange things that you don't need, you want to get in the street and make a sort of a market in public, people go and exchange. And also this. This is intimate relationship of a certain level, okay? This guy is surviving. And this guy is surviving in public space, and he chooses to be in public space where there are other people he doesn't know. You won't find a guy like this probably outside this building, but you'll find him in the center of town, where he expects to have a lot of people passing next to him, and some of whom might drop a coin. Okay? So that's about intimacy. Anonymity is another issue. And I'll show you how to achieve anonymity when you design cities. So I designed the city for you. This is a sketch of a city, okay? The gray squares are private spaces, buildings, whatever. The gaps between them are public space. The green and the yellow, whatever it is just to denote bigger public space, like a park or a square, if you like, okay? Now, a city could have buildings around one public space. It could. You know, conceptually. An ideal city, somebody could come with an idea, like Le Corbusier came with an idea, so I could come with an idea and say, in order not to have all these streets and people moving around, I'll make a big building, huge building, square, and the square in the middle, and finished. We did a city. Now, the idea is that public space should be divided into smaller spaces that people pass through by chance, so that we cannot expect them to be where they are, and we know nothing about them because of the fact that they are there. Okay? So if we take public space and divide it into a network like this, and there are enough junctions, a person in point A, this guy with the dog, he can select to take this green line to go to point B. But the next day, he can think, maybe I'll pass by a cafe on the way, and he takes the red line, walking there. Or another day, he takes another line. He does the same effort, it's the same distance, but each time he chooses a different way, which makes him unexpected in the street where he's passing. And therefore, it strengthens his anonymity. Same goes for this lady in C, you know, she can go to D this way and that way. In a city like this, statistically, most of the action will take place in the center. Obviously, more people will pass in this area than will pass in this junction, for instance, just because of statistics. Which means that in the central areas, public space would be probably a little bigger because it can contain more people, like a park or a square. Now I'm saying that these two aspects of intimacy and anonymity, in a sense, can serve for you as both a litmus test to test whether the environment you are in is a city. And when I'm saying it's a city, it's not that it was declared a city by the Ministry of the Interior, but whether it's a city worth its term, whether its title, okay? Or whether it is not. And in order for you to judge, this is what needs to happen, okay? In public space, one should see people around and know little or nothing about them. Now, usually I'm stopped at this point by somebody in public and saying, come on, you're talking nonsense. I like to go out to my street and meet a neighbor that I know, or meet a friend. It's always nice. And I like to know the guy at the grocery. So sometimes, you know, we talk and I feel good when I know some people. And it's important for me to stress what I said in the beginning, that the city is a tool for contacts, which means I'm all for the people you know in the street. But I'm also for the freedom you have that they don't control you. Because if you are in the street and everybody knows you, every movement that you do is under surveillance. And you lose some of your privacy and some of your freedom. So the mixture that the city allows is both to make your community, your closer community, close to you, in a sense, not physically, but make a big community of contacts, while still being free to make new contacts, find new connections, and develop yourself and reach self-actualization, if you like. Okay. So, if I sum it up, there are three conditions for a city. One sees people in public space, one knows nothing or little about them, and one spots potential destinations. I should say a word about this. Potential destinations are the places where you pass from public to private. You enter a house, you enter a shop, you enter a school. Even public buildings are private spaces. For me, a private space is a place where somebody can pass by chance, not intentionally. Okay? Whatever you go, wherever you go intentionally, you may go intentionally to a street, to a certain street, but you can also pass there by chance. You don't go to a mall, to a shopping mall, by chance. You go there on purpose. So a shopping mall is not public space, it's private space. So the more spots you have of transfer between public and private means you have more contacts, because the contacts that you make in public space become more intimate once you get in there. You know, when you see the grocery shop from outside, it's you and the grocery shop, nobody knows each other. Once you go in and you discuss the price of something with the person who sells there, you already have a more intimate contact. The next time he will know you, and so forth. Okay. So basically understanding the city is just as simple as a step into the street. If you go into the street, you look around, you can judge. So for instance, if you go out of here, look outside into the public space and you see people around you, and you know that most of them are students, you know this is not a very efficient urban situation. When you go in the center of Innsbruck, outside from my hotel into the street, and you see people around, you don't know anything about them. They can meet me from Tel Aviv walking there, then you are in a city worth its title. Okay, so now I have to rush, I think. Okay. This is not enough. This is, up to now, it was theory. But you know, one of the reasons that traffic engineers took over planning of cities from architects is that they had measurable entities. They could measure the number of cars per hour that would pass in a certain street. And they could tell you, in order for you to pass more cars through the street, you need a wider street. Okay? So when they came to politicians or to decision makers and proved their cases with numbers, it was very easy for them. The architects came with spirit. You know, we said we feel like that. They will feel better this way. They will, they will be healthier if they are in the public, in the green open space, and so forth. Can't really measure it. So I looked for measurable indicators for the city. So one of the indicators, and the most important one, is what I call PSA. It's public space allocation per person. How much public space there is per one person in a city. And in public space, I mean every place that a person can pass by chance. Even if it's declared legally as right of way or whatever, if one can go through it by chance, I count it as public space. The next one is network density. That's quite simple. How many junctions in a network in a certain area? Okay, that's quite easy to measure. And the last one is average destination distance. The average distance between passages from private to public. Entrance to a shop, entrance to a home, etc. Now, in order to get to the magnitude, order of magnitude of these indicators, I studied small areas, unfortunately, because I didn't have enough funds to make a big research. And I challenge you to follow my feet and try and widen the research of these indicators. I took a 500 meter by 500 meter square in 4 urban places. Nice in France, okay, we talked about it earlier. Ashdod, it's a new city, fairly new city in Israel. Santo Amaro in Recife in Brazil. Santo Amaro is a favela in Brazil, and Boundary. And the reasons I selected these 4 are, it's not by chance. Nice and Ashdod are fairly similar in size. I mean, I think Nice is about 300,000, 330,000 inhabitants. Ashdod is about 260, 250,000 inhabitants. They both lie on the shore of the Mediterranean, have a wonderful connection to a great sea, which you in Austria don't have, unfortunately. That's why you're so cold here. and Nice has an airport that serves 10 million tourists a year, and Ashdod hardly has a train station and no tourists at all. So Nice is a really successful city, and Ashdod is not. I know them both quite intimately. I know Nice and I know Ashdod. So I thought, if I compare the two, the indicators on these 2 cities, it will give me an idea. Then the Santo Amaro I selected because I looked for what is called an organic urban structure. By organic, I mean something that was not planned by professionals, but actually built by the people themselves because they needed it. They just took things from here and there, and they had to survive, and they built whatever they built. In fact, in many ways, like the very old cities we are very happy to walk through now, like Rome and maybe the old town of Barcelona and so on, they're also we tend to call them organic, although I think they're less organic than we tend to call them. But why did I choose it? Because I thought that if my assumption that the city is an expression of the special characteristic of the human being, then the fact that human beings are building a city by themselves should give me good indications. So I thought, why not compare the indicators and see how they work. Boundary was because, again, they tried to do the physical thing that works, copy a thing that worked, a network of streets that works, like Camilo Site would ask to do, and so on, and doesn't work. So I wanted to find out why it doesn't work. So I selected checked the three indicators on these 4 urban environments. Now we can see the smileys on this public space allocation. You see that Nice and Santo Amaro are very near to each other in public space allocation. Nice is a modern city. People use the car there. They live in very different density of housing in Nice than in Santo Amaro. Nice is 5 to 6 stories buildings. Santo Amaro is 1 or 2. But 10 people in 20 meters living in Santo Amaro compared to Nice and so on. But when you compare the indicator, they come very near. Where Ashdod is almost 4 times that of both of them, and Boundary, I was shocked when I got the figure for Boundary, 65. And I tried to answer myself. I didn't understand how come Boundary is so high on that figure. And the only I have 2 explanations. One is the fact that during the 17th or 18th century, when buildings like this were built, the average household in England was about 12 to 15 people, where in Boundary today it's less than 2. So you have less people to use the public space. On the other hand, Boundary camouflages the fact that its people use cars. So it has a lot of public space that is made for the cars. You don't see it in the main streets, but there are back streets that are used by people to compete on people. So you have less people in public space. You have a lot of public space in Boundary, more than you need. Network density, again, you see how Ashdod is low. Ashdod these are figures for a quarter of a kilometer. If you want to know how much it should be for a kilometer, you should multiply all these numbers by 4. Okay, so Nice is about 200 junctions per kilometer. Boundary and Santo Amaro are much more. So in that respect, Boundary, the people who planned Boundary understood the network. They just didn't have the fuel for the fire, but they understood the network. But the people who planned Ashdod obviously didn't. And the last one is this one, which is really shocking, where Ashdod fails dramatically, is the average destination distance. Where in Paris and Nice, in Nice and Santo Amaro, it's 11 meters between entrances, in average. 11 meters. It's about from here to there. In Ashdod, it's 72. Okay, now I'm going to be a little cruel. Read what Le Corbusier said. He said, to be modern is not a fashion. It is a state. It is necessary to understand history, and he who understands history knows how to find continuity between that which was, that which is, and that which will be. And I'll show you in a minute how to be modern is a fashion, in a minute. This guy, who is a very important guy, I don't know if you mentioned him in your course, did you talk about him, Jan Gehl? Yeah? Jan Gehl is a very important urbanist from Denmark. He actually helped revive the city of Copenhagen. And he says cultures and climates differ all over the world, but people are the same. And in that respect, I think he refers to what I was talking about, the people as the genome of the city. They are gathered in public if you give them a good place to do it. Now, Le Corbusier took this city, this wonderful city, and suggested to do this. Now, this we are laughing at it, but now I'll show you how, when you use the indicators, you can tell that, and I don't need to just say this was beautiful and this is not beautiful and therefore we shouldn't do it. I don't care about beauty. But I care about what it does to the people in public space. So if I look at the indicators, obviously he added a hell of a lot of public space for the same number of people, which means he enlarged the public space allocation per person tremendously. Okay? So when you move out of your private quarters into public space, you will hardly see people around you. Then he changed the network density. Look at the network density here, and look at this network. I mean, how many junctions per kilometer are here, and how many junctions per kilometer are here? And last, the distance between destinations is huge. To this building, maybe there are 3 entrances. So altogether, how many entrances are from private to public in this compared to this? In one little street here, there are more entrances than in the entire plan of Le Corbusier. So if Le Corbusier knew what you now know from what you heard today, he would have never suggested that. Not because it doesn't look right. I don't care how it looks. This is Copenhagen, the center of Copenhagen, and this space looks like this almost all year round, even when it's cold. And that's the work of Jan Gehl in many respects, although, luckily for him, he had the basic city to make it work even better. He actually managed to take the cars out from the center. This is really the center of Copenhagen. I'm showing this to you, and it's not a big thing, not a great thing for a planner to take a successful area and make it even more successful. Like, for instance, what they did in Times Square in New York. You know, when they took the cars out and put seats in Times Square, and they became a big hit. They took a successful place and made it even more successful, but it was already successful, so I'm not impressed. But in Copenhagen, they are now building these. This is a new neighborhood in Copenhagen where some of the big names, like Big, you know, the office Big, they design buildings here that are purely fashion, the fashion that Le Corbusier talked about. And they create these spaces. I was there. There is nobody in the street. And architects go there and take photographs of the buildings. And they admire them. And I think it's a crime. Okay, that's roughly the end. I will finish just by showing you these 2 streets from Tel Aviv, my city. Tel Aviv, I don't know what Klaus thinks, but I think Tel Aviv is an ugly city. Really, I do think it's an ugly city. There are some nice buildings there. If you go and look for them, you know, Bauhaus.
Places as well.
There are some nice buildings, but it's nothing like Rome or Paris, or it's nothing like Innsbruck in beauty. But it's a happy, lively city. And I mean, look, I found this. Tel Aviv is in top 3 cities in the world, says Lonely Planet. Don't believe it. I think it's a joke. But Tel Aviv is a happy city despite its ugliness. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillel, for this theory and thoughts about the urban genome. I have just some short questions concerning those new towns in China. I often found it pretty strange to copy cities like Hull cities like Venice or even other cities, but are they really intended for living, or are those more tourist centers? I never stayed there, and I never read enough about it.
They're intended for living.
Really
they're intended for living for the upper classes, for the richer people.
So it's still worse than Las Vegas, let's say, which has a Canal Grande as well.
Las Vegas is a Las Vegas.
This is just intended for tourism.
Yes, Las Vegas is a shameless copying, in, just to sell for the tourists to buy put their money in the machines, and so that Sheldon Adelson can make money.
So we can really compare those new towns in China copying traditional European towns with Poundbury, because Poundbury as well is a city or a borough intended for living, intended for what we usually call real life.
Yes, we can compare because in Poundbury you also have. I mean, it's not built for the look. The whole area of Dorchester is, I think, in some ways, became a retiree environment for people who are older people who leave London after they finish their career and they want to live in the country, and they find a place in these quiet urban areas. But they are intended to live, for living, just like the Chinese towns. And the fact is that the people of Dorchester themselves say that this is artificial, and that is the place for the tourists to go and look at, Poundbury. And when the guys from Poundbury want to actually have a life, they go to Dorchester.
I think the problem of Poundbury as well is that it is not a city built by any anonymous investor or any anonymous company. So that it is one of the most popular and one of the most well-known people living in the UK. It is His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. And he has, no, this is a serious problem, because personally, I would say that Poundbury is just a clone. It is not a real city.
But it's intended to be.
It is intended to be, but it doesn't work.
And the question is whether it doesn't work because the prince built it, or because they designed it not knowing what to design. Thinking that if they follow the physical shape, they will create a city. Thinking that if they clone the style and the structure, they'll get it. And I think this is a big mistake. And, sometimes when I really want to be rude to my architect friends, I tell them, look, you know Tel Aviv. One of the main streets of Tel Aviv is called Ibn Gvirol. You remember that street?
Yeah.
There is no one building that is worth mentioning in Ibn Gvirol. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
I mean, the facades are...
one of the most ugly streets I ever saw.
Okay, it's really a banal nothing. Really, nothing to write home about. It has a colonnade all along both sides, shops on the ground floor, and housing above. All the buildings are about 4 stories.
4 or 5 stories.
4 or 5 stories at the maximum. The buildings are ugly, and not on top of the fact that they are not any special architecture, they are also terribly kept. So they really look bad. Okay? So when I want to be really rude to my architect friends, I tell them, look, take the facades of Piazza San Marco in Venice, and like in a cardboard model, take the facades out and replace them with the facades from our street in Tel Aviv. The square will be almost as successful, because the architecture doesn't matter. And I'm telling you this, believe me, I'm an architect, and I'm an architect who loves beautiful buildings, and I'm a freak on detail and on detailing of buildings and proportions or whatever you like. And if we had time, I could show you some. I didn't do so many buildings, but the ones I did, I think I think are quite nice. And I tell you, it's not important when you talk about the city. Something else is important about the city, and the important thing about the city is that you have people in the street and you know nothing about them. Once you reach that, you made a good city, and not a good city, an efficient city. Now, a little word about a good and efficient. Look, Lagos in Africa is an efficient city. It's not good for all of you, and it's not good for me. But it's an efficient city for the people of Nigeria. They flock into it from just like they go to the favelas in Brazil. The favela is not a good city for us, but it's an efficient city for them. And what I'm talking about is how we design efficient cities in whatever situation. If we are asked to design a city in India, or in Austria, or in wherever, we know what we are looking for. And if we know what we are looking for, and that is to have people in the street and know very little about them or almost nothing about them, then we will design a good city. An efficient city, sorry. Again,
not a good one or a bad one, but an efficient one.
Yeah, because a good one is relative to what? I mean, you know, good is you know, in India, a good city is different from a good city in Europe. What can we do? I mean, for most people, urban environments in India are impossible to live in. And not the opposite. I mean, most Indians would feel very good if they come and live in European cities. We see what's happening now with the refugees. People are getting used to good standards very easily. It's the other way around which is difficult.
It's an interesting sentence saying in architectural faculties that architecture doesn't really matter.
I know. By somebody who thinks architecture is very important.
But we are looking for architecture, and we are looking for beauty. You didn't talk much about beauty. This was just, let's say, more a statistic lecture. I have to think it over, but I found many complete. I agree completely with some of that what you said. But what is the reason? Why do people go to Rome or to Venice or to Innsbruck, visiting the old cities, the beauty of the city? We are looking for beauty. We need it.
Absolutely.
We need it.
Absolutely.
Maybe we wouldn't need it for work. Maybe we would not need it for having an efficient city. But as we are human beings, we look for beauty.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. But we go to Rome, and Rome is beautiful, first of all, because it was efficient for its people. And it became beautiful over the time. Now, you know, we as planners, we think that we have to deal with everything. We have to make the general plan of the city, and then we actually have to design the buildings. In fact, cities never develop like that. You know, in most cases, like even in Barcelona, where Cerdà, you know, what did Cerdà do? Cerdà took how do you call it? A page for mathematics, you know, with lines this way and that way. Put it on the ground and made this is my plan, roughly. That's what he did. Not much more than that. He didn't design the buildings. Now, some buildings in Barcelona are nothing to write home about. Other buildings in Barcelona are buildings by Gaudi. Gaudi lives very well with the plan that Cerdà did, and so do the bad buildings, because they follow a very simple urban rule. Now, the fact whether the city will become beautiful has nothing to do with you, because it might happen years after. Some architectural style the economy. Well, there's another thing that goes into this, but I want to stress it because your point is very important. Obviously, we love beauty. There is no question about it, and a beautiful city will attract more tourists than an ugly city. But a lively city will become beautiful. In a sense, did you hear about William White? William White was at the same time almost with Jane Jacobs. He was an American planner. He was in the planning body of New York at a certain time, and he did an amazing research and he wrote a book which is called The Social Life of Small Urban Public Spaces. I think that's the name of the book, roughly like that. The Social Life of Small Public Spaces. How he researched these spaces, he would take a film camera. At the time there was no video cameras. He would take a film camera, put it above in a building, above a public space, and film every second, and then film it quickly, so you could see how people move around, very quickly during the day. And there was a watch on the picture, so you could see the time, what happens any minute in this space. And from that, he came out with a number of conclusions, which are very interesting. And he has one sentence which I always like to quote. And he says, in the end, what interests people most is other people. And that's, I think, a sentence to remember. If you wouldn't go into an empty restaurant.
Oh, never ever.
What?
Never ever.
You would never go to an empty even if it's beautiful. If you go, they tell you, look, go to this beautiful place, you go there, there's no one there. You're going to be the only one sitting there. You're not going to go there. Why? Because you are interested in people. And the city is about people, it's not about architecture. And I think, I really think architects are arrogant bastards. Really. They're arrogant bastards.
Because they are only caring about beauty
and about themselves, and about exposing themselves. Instead, one of the arrogant bastards is very well-known bastard called Frank Gehry. All these. He did a wonderful building in Manhattan. Really, a wonderful building that I wish I could show you, but you look for it. It's a tower. It's a skyscraper, housing for very rich people on top of a podium of some 5 or 6 stories of a public school. Now you go. Unfortunately, you don't have Google Earth and Google Street View in Austria, because most of my research I'm doing with these tools.
Yeah. It's forbidden in Austria.
I think it's a big mistake. For me, it's terrible. I could have shown you a lot of things about Innsbruck. I'll tell you a word about this, but before that, you go on Google Earth in New York to Spruce Street. Spruce is S-P-R-U-C-E. You write Spruce Street, Gehry, Frank Gehry. And Google Earth will take you there. And then you go into the street view and go next to the building. And you'll see that you walk in tiny little streets and you see a very simple building that you would never dream was designed by Frank Gehry. Looks just like a red brick building with banal square opening, nothing special. Above, there is a tower that looks like a curtain, like folds of a curtain, like these. Kind of really intricate, very expensive to build. but you don't see it. I mean, you see it when you want to get your neck hurt and look like that. You see it. But when you walk in the street, the building works for the city. And the fact that above happens what happens doesn't mean anything and is not important.
Did he design really the basement, or is
he designed the whole building?
The whole building.
But
so it is not an extension on just an existing brick building in
No. It's a brand new building. And look, what happened to him is what happened to Gaudi in Barcelona. He had a building code that he had to adhere to. They told him, you can build here this wall, that you can do. Then up there you can do whatever you like. You have to go back a little bit and so forth, like they did with. When I first came to Barcelona, I was a young student of architecture. I knew about Gaudi, and I wanted to see the Casa Mila, obviously. So I walked in the street looking for the Casa Mila, and didn't see it. And the map showed that it has to be here, and then I looked again, and I just passed it. You can pass by the Casa Mila without noticing it. Why? Because there was a building code, very strict building code, that Mr. Ingenious, very talented, very egomaniac, Gaudi, had to deal with, and he dealt with, and he was polite. And still managed to express himself and express his art, being polite. It doesn't have to work one against the other. It's the idea that the city has nothing to do with the definition of public space and the activity in public space. Made buildings be objects like vases of flowers. So people can put them one here and one there, and you're standing there to look at it and admire it. What a beautiful thing. Fashion. Exactly what Le Corbusier was talking about. But he thought it's not fashion, but it's fashion. And it changes. Marion took me by bus, and we passed on the way here some different periods of architecture, which you can say immediately. And architects are those that talk about the spirit of the place. What has to do the spirit of the place with the architecture that they're doing here now? I could go there and tell her, this is 1980s, this is 1990s, this is 2000. And they do the same in Tel Aviv or in any other place in the world because they couldn't care less. I think architecture is bankrupt. Sorry. You are the younger generation. You can carry it through.
Yeah. So is constructing our own future.
When I see all these in schools of architecture, usually it's mad in plan and very boring in section. But that's another issue.
I would just like to return for one moment to this beauty argument. You skipped it completely, but we all know and we all agree that we love old cities due to their history and also due to their beauty.
No, we love them because we love the life. We love them because we love the life.
And the beauty.
The beauty comes with it. It's not that.
That's a point.
Architects say in schools of architecture, I hear a student design a square and says, we'll put here an art gallery, and here there will be a cafe, and people will come. And I tell them, look, if you put those galleries at the cafe, they'll go bankrupt because nobody passes by chance in your square. You understand? So the square doesn't have a chance to become beautiful. Look at projects, not only by students. I can show you dozens of projects where, an architect is given a big project, urban project. They give him his boundaries, usually in the middle of a road between another neighborhood. That's your site. You do this new neighborhood, okay? Then he looks inside into his site, and inside he would do wonderful things, spaces, squares, you name it. The road, the street, to the next neighborhood will be for him the perimeter. And I think his chief responsibility is that place that connects to the city, where he has to design the best space for people. And then let that affect what's happened inside, rather than the other way around. But they always say, this is my site, I'm doing my project here, you know, forget about the city. My ego is here.
Do you think that cities becomes more and more beautiful over the years? Just to return to this ugly street in Tel Aviv, let's say, does it have a chance to get beautiful over the next 100, 200, 500 years?
Maybe yes, I'll tell you why. Maybe yes, I'm not sure. This is an interesting question.
If it continues working as an efficient street, as a good street concerning your theory,
yeah.
Do you think that people want to make it more beautiful? To improve it?
I think if it works
in terms of beauty?
You know,
just to return to this old-fashioned word.
To tell you the truth, I don't deal with this question myself too much, because I don't think it's all that important. But, because I don't deal with it, I don't have a ready answer. But I can, thinking about it while you are asking, I would say that if a city is successful, then